Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks so much for being here with us. I'd like to welcome all of you to the Children's Partnership's 30th anniversary event, the third in our For Our Children's Future Speaker series. We're grateful that you're with us for this important conversation and for your partnership and support these past 30 years. Before I begin today's discussion with our esteemed guest, our interpreter, Edna Santizo, will walk us through how to access Spanish language interpretation services. Edna?
Thank you. And hello, everyone. I'm going to be providing instructions on how to access interpretation. I'll do that first in Spanish and I'll follow in English. Thank you. Hola a todas y todos. Buenas tardes. En un segundito van a ver en la parte baja de su pantalla, si están en una computadora, un icono que dice interpretación. Cuando aparezca, por favor, presione y seleccione el idioma de su preferencia y también mute original audio o silenciar el audio original. Si está en una tableta o un teléfono, en donde están los tres puntos o donde dice más, presione, seleccione Language Interpretation, el idioma de su preferencia y también mute original audio. Si necesita asistencia técnica, por favor, déjenos saber a través del chat. So hello everyone, in just a second we're going to enable the interpretation function. You're going to see an icon appear at the bottom of your screen. Please click and select the language of your preference, either English or Spanish, and also mute original audio. If you're on a mobile device or a tablet, you're going to see three dots where it says more. Click, select language interpretation, the language of your preference, and also mute original audio. If you need technical assistance, you can always reach us out via the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Edna. Gracias, Edna. Again, my name is Mayra Alvarez, and I am the president of the Children's Partnership. A few announcements. A recording of this webinar will be shared after the event. If you have a question, please drop it in the Zoom Q&A box. There will be an audience Q&A portion at the end of the webinar. For closed captioning, please click the live transcript button from the in-meeting Zoom toolbar and select one of the options from the menu. Before we get this virtual conversation started, the Children's Partnership wants to say a few comments. First, that we are inclusive of all people and perspectives, except for hate. We do not tolerate racist, transphobic, homophobic, xenophobic, misogynistic, or malicious comments. And we will remove and report anyone who feels the need to disrupt the growth and peace of this space. Our objective is to hold today's conversation in a space where all people are safe and welcomed. Again, thank you for being with us and being part of this community. I also want to take a moment to thank the champions that are with us today. Without their support, this event series would not be possible. The California Healthcare Foundation, Altamed Health Services Corporation, HealthNet, and First 5 LA, alongside all our other generous sponsors. Again, thank you for joining us today and for your commitment to children's well-being. About 30 years ago, our organization was founded as a different kind of children's organization, an organization that sought to set a children's agenda on emerging issues. And today, it's that foresight and innovation that defines our approach and remain drivers in determining our priorities for where we might be able to make the most impact for children who have been historically marginalized by our institutions and systems, specifically children of color in the state of California. We pride ourselves on collaborating with others to drive that shared agenda forward for children. When we considered how to celebrate these 30 years, we wanted to invite you, our community, into a conversation about the work ahead. Most of us that are part of this community, we believe that children deserve the freedom to be themselves and to learn the truth of our past in order to understand our present and create a better future. However, across the country, a disturbing trend of policies and narratives is at work. We're seeing book bans, we're seeing eroding child labor laws, efforts to strip the rights of trans children, to attempts to erase our history. These attacks on our children may take many forms, but they are all harming our children's safety, their mental health, their education, and it's hindering growth and opportunity for millions, particularly children of color, those in immigrant communities, LGBTQ children, and children who live in deep poverty. Many may refer to these as culture wars, but they are really questions that speak to the core of who we are. as leaders, as parents, as community members, and most importantly, who we want to be. As a Californian, I am proud to be part of a state that has made an important statement to the nation and the world about who we are, especially as we consider the last 30 years and the progress we have made to undergo significant social and political evolution. I am so excited that today's session of our speaker series will delve deeper into that evolution and how it allows for greater commitment to the health of our children. Before our conversation with our esteemed guest, Commissioner Lara, I am excited to share a short documentary film about California's journey toward Health for All that was created with our partners at Jonas and Company and a wonderful advisory council of experts. Health for All is the successful campaign to make healthcare coverage accessible for all Californians, regardless of immigration status, and it went into full effect in January of this year. We'd like to thank the California Endowment for their support of this storytelling project. And now, to reflect on this video and begin our discussion, I am so excited to be joined by California Insurance Commissioner Ricardo Lara. Before taking office as Insurance Commissioner in 2019, Commissioner Lara served in both houses of the California legislature, representing constituents in the southeast cities of Los Angeles County. Throughout his career in public service, he's been a relentless advocate for Californians, focusing on those in need and those who have historically experienced systemic and racial biases. He believes affordable healthcare should be within reach for all Californians. As state senator, we were proud to be amongst the coalition that worked closely with him as he authored the Health for All Kids Act, which now covers California children with full scope Medi-Cal, regardless of their immigration status. He supports efforts to continue to reduce the number of uninsured Californians, to strengthen our clinics and public health system, and to lower costs for all. Commissioner Lara, thank you for being with us. I think you're on mute. I see you.
Now you have me crying. I wasn't expecting the video. What do you want me to say?
I'm telling you, it's interesting because you're in a room right now full of advocates who believe in the cause to fight for our kids, whether professionally or personally, right? And I'm curious, as you reflect on that video, as you get emotional, as we all do, those of us that have seen this video, I'm going to just start with a really basic overall question. What does Health for All mean for California's kids?
Oh my God, I can't even talk. That means absolutely everything. And we were those kids. Hearing those amazing advocates and being in the Senate floor, in the committees talking about these issues and seeing the brave young men and women who were so much courageous than I would have ever been to go before a legislative body and put themselves out there is amazing. It really embodies the courage that we have as children of immigrants and the responsibility that we have. Oh my God, I gotta stop. Okay, get together. And it's just like, I was that kid. We were those kids. I always talk about how it was a bit traumatizing having to be that communicator and that link to mainstream culture for our immigrant parents. But I think those are the skills that I obtained to actually be a statewide leader now. It's the same feel, it's the confidence that it gives me to walk into a room and be the only person there, no matter where in the world I'm at, and proudly represent California unapologetically, proud of our values, of what we stand for. And to be able to now finally give full scope Medi-Cal to all our community, and hopefully, we finally get to a point where the Affordable Care Act allows for undocumented immigrants to pay into the system to capture those folks. which is something that was a reason why I ran for insurance commissioner, to finish that loop. It, you know, it's everything. You know, in such time of hate and rhetoric, videos like this is like, okay, I'm ready to go fight. Like, I'm ready to do this another 24 years. You know, it's you need these reminders. And so this is kudo to like the to the Children's Out Partnership that's protecting our kids. That I wish we had a children's partnership when I was a kid, right? You mean we were just navigating the world trying to figure it out. And so I'm just proud. I'm just, you know, I had no idea I was gonna be this emotional. I had my talking points and everything. And so I just think, you know, the cat's out of the bag. Let's continue to fight. Let's not lose focus on the rhetoric. Let's stay focused on what we can achieve and how we can replicate this in other states and be unapologetic about who we are. I mean, when I first did AB 540, we were begging kids to come out to expose themselves, and now to see them, you know, they're done. They're not going to hide, and these are our children. You know, our children are everything, and these little beautiful immigrant children from all over the world are it's what makes us such an amazing place to live and makes us an economic juggernaut. Let's not forget that the state and our country also benefit. Just as we work ourselves to the bone and our parents work 3-4 jobs, well, that helps the economy, and we can't shy away from that. And so it was amazing to be able to deliver that. And I just, you know, think of little Ricardo back in the day, who was one of the biggest conversations that I ever heard between my mom and dad, were them fighting about how they were going to pay healthcare bills. And that's the same energy that I took to this fight. And kids should not be worried about these things. You know, our immigrant kids should not be worried about how they're going to pay, how their parents are going to pay bills. They should be worried about recess, about their favorite subject in school, about, I don't know, the latest trends. I have no idea. But, you know, they shouldn't be worried about how they're going to, or the fact that they can't go to a summer camp because they don't have insurance, or science camp, which is one of the things that a young girl told me, like, now I could go to science camp in Florida because I have insurance. These little things that we never thought about, you know,
that open doors.
It's just a beautiful thing to see that we were able to accomplish that. And that is in honor of all those children and those families that come and sacrifice absolutely everything.
Absolutely, Commissioner. I could not agree more. And we all owe you a great deal of debt for the leadership that you brought and the work that you did with your colleagues. We were so proud to be part of a coalition of immigrant justice organizations and health organizations, you know, really bringing that fight. But you said something that's really important. You said this idea that you were begging people to come forward with stories, and that has changed and it's evolved, that people are unafraid, they're undocumented and unafraid, and really stepping into their power. You know, so much of our advocacy at our organization, we try to center that wisdom and leadership of communities, the strengths that our culture brings, and how we can put that forward. You know, that like that saying, those closest to the problem are closest to the solution, right? And at your career, you've demonstrated that commitment, whether it was AB 540 and fighting for in-state tuition for undocumented Californians, or Health4All and uplifting these stories. Can you talk a little bit about what it means to center community wisdom in policymaking, in advocacy, and how that comes out today in the role that you have?
Yeah, it's really fascinating to me that you know, the first thing I told my chief of staff, because, you know, after working with Marco Firebaugh and his great legacy, I sat my staff around. I'm like, I do not want to do immigration bills. I want to like set my own chart. I want to be my own person. And people are going to, you know, when you get elected to the legislature, they're like, oh, he's Latino, he's gay, he's from the East Side. Oh, he's going to be this person, right? They start to define you. And my chief of staff's like, okay, fine, whatever. And she worked with me with Marco, by the way. And so she's like, let him have his moment. And then everything that would piss me off that I would read about that got me up to go up to Sacramento and get on that 6 a.m., 7 a.m. flight from LA was immigration issues. Like, it was, how is this happening? And so I said, why am I, clearly the universe is sending me these messages that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I not only embraced it, I like fully stepped into to this moment, because it all made it became all clear. This is me, this is my story, this is all our stories. And just as those kids were demonstrating how courageous they were, I didn't care. Call me whatever you need to call me, but I'm gonna carry these bills, and I'm gonna push for them just like any other issue. And so we embarked on this journey of, how do we start righting these historical wrongs around tuition, around English only in our schools, which we were able to eliminate, to now multilingual education, to healthcare, to grants for our undocumented kids and students, for our students to be able to serve as AS presidents and vice presidents in elections and be able to receive a stipend like everybody else. And it just, all these life experiences that I lived were meant for me to be on the floor of the Senate to fight for these issues. And it was just clear as day that this is why I was sent to the legislature, and to be able to give immigrants who have professions back home, can pass a state exam and open their own business. That happens in California now. And so we fully embraced it, and we're like, let's do it all. Let's just go for it. And now we went from a legislature where we even used to beg Democrats for votes to now it's just the norm. We've normalized including immigrants into the fabric of our society and integrate them into our economy and quickly, and that includes their children, right? And so it's fascinating to see how all this has changed over a couple of years. And again, you give me kudos, absolutely not. We all deserve it. Everybody played a pivotal role, because without the advocacy, without, the people telling me like, oh, if you would have told me you're crazy, then I would have probably stopped, but we had a group of folks that were like, if you believe, we believe with you. And that's why it's all our victory. This is for all of us.
Right.
And so that's there's some certain power when you are just unapologetic and unbothered, and you're secure in who you are as an individual, and that doesn't take from anybody else. And once you're firm in your standing, you're unstoppable. And that's the whole point, is to make sure that our immigrant communities are fully realized, self-empowered individuals that know their place, know what they contribute, and know what they're worth, and know what they deserve for what they contribute to this country and California. And so that has always been the goal, for self-empowerment, so that they can advocate for themselves, right? Because we're not always going to be here, but the movement continues.
Absolutely. And you said, this is all of us. This is for all of us. This was on behalf of all of us. And I want to pick up on that, because at our organization, we really pride ourselves on this commitment to intersectional advocacy, right? That the belief that the great Audre Lorde says, there is no thing as a single issue struggle, because we do not lead single issue lives, right? It's whole child, whole family. There are so many factors impacting health today. It's absolutely health insurance coverage, but it's access to healthy food and affordable housing and access to parks and a safe neighborhood. I want to hear a little bit about your thoughts on how those issues at face value, they may not be a child-specific issue, but they actually have incredible impacts on families' ability to raise healthy kids.
Absolutely. One of the things that I was trying to fight when I was still in the Senate was this whole issue around childhood obesity, and what are the characteristics that determine why certain communities have less percentage of obesity rates. And an article just came out maybe last week pointing at where the largest percentage of childhood obesity exists, and they're all in Latino communities, right? And so I go back to the fact that, what do our communities look like why do we keep allowing for, fast foods? Why do we keep allowing, like, it goes down to like zoning, to permitting, to how do we access healthy food? And it's not in a way, one of the things that I did once was I brought a chef to come and bring all the señoras and be like, okay, we love pozole. How do we make pozole a little more healthy, right? And we're gonna use the neighborhood markets in your community. We're not gonna take you to a Whole Foods. We're not gonna take you to in your community. How can you modify your recipes so that we're not telling you not to eat your delicious food, but we're telling you how to modify it, right? So it's not like you're not castigating people, you're not casting judgment, you're just giving tools so that children ultimately we lessen their obesity rates. You look at obesity rates, you look at our neighborhood schools, access to parks. It is all connected to this child. It's all connected to the child, right? And what type of life do we want that individual to live? As like the endowment clearly says, your life outcome isn't determined, it's determined by the zip code of where you live. And we have to go back to that and challenge the system from the ground up, because our kids depend on us, right?
Yeah.
The kids depend on us to provide that nurturing, healthy environment so that they can thrive. And so I always go back to those kind of fundamental issues, and then start being practical about how we get this done, right? I could have easily said, no, we want all Health for All or nothing, but we were able to get our children. And I knew our whole office thinking, and I know some of the advocates and some of our folks were a little miffed at the time, but I said, look, if we get our kids, one, we open the door. Two, we demonstrate that the sky's not gonna fall. And three, that this is not gonna be an economic peril for the state. And you create believers, right? Same thing with AB 540. We went from like some restrictions to now like fully opening, every avenue for our undocumented students. And so that's one of the other things where it's like, how do you build a multi-year plan to get to where you want to go? And these are complex issues, right? So, and we're all integrated in it. So it all has to be part of a kind of coordinated strategy around the child, and what kind of child do we want to develop? What kind of child do we want to raise? And the other issue, as you said, Mayra, that we often fall into this trap that if somebody gets something, that somehow we're missing out, and we have to get out of that paradigm.
Yeah.
We all succeed when we're all succeeding together. And and I think the new generation, they get it, right? Because one, they're multi-ethnic, they're biracial, they're navigating all these different identities, and they're not caught up in silos like maybe some of us were, or how we grew up politically. And so it brings me joy to see another community succeed. It brings me joy to see other communities, because you know what? That opens the door for another group to one day go in. And so we're all connected, and we're all in this kind of, struggle and fight together. And so this is the beauty about our country. I mean, look, we're not perfect any means, but look at what we were able to accomplish here in California. And no matter what the haters say in other states, they are looking at what we're doing. As insurance commissioner, I get to travel the world and get to meet with other commissioners from around the country and the territories, and they're always looking at what we're doing. Even the red states, they know that access to healthcare is critical. They know that making sure children have access it's less costly than having them in the emergency rooms, right? And so all these things are interconnected, and we are leading, and that's what we do in California. And our California kids are not competing with Nevada, Utah, or New York. Our California kids are competing with India, China, Japan, Europe. They're competing at a global stage. And so how do we best prepare them nutrition-wise, educational-wise, language-wise, and healthcare-wise, so that they can meet the moment that we've set them up to meet?
Yeah, you said so many good things, Commissioner. This idea of us living in this global society where you said, we are all connected, right? And this idea that my child is your child.
Right.
your child is that we are all responsible, right? And it does seem like in society today, we've moved away from this
Right.
village mentality, that it's about this nuclear family and it's your responsibility. That puts so much pressure on parents and caregivers. I mean, I don't know if you saw, the Surgeon General just released a report on the mental health of parents, right? And the struggle that parents are going through. And what you just said about the responsibility to each other as community members, as residents, as people who call this state home, that makes us stronger in our efforts together. And I think Health4All is an example of that, right? It wasn't just health advocates. It
No.
wasn't just immigrant advocates or child advocates. It was providers and advocates and families themselves. And I'm curious, we've got more work to do. We do. And that intersectional approach to advocacy and not falling victim to the pie isn't big enough. How do we do that when we're facing these tough budget years? When we're always faced with what are we going to cut versus what we're not, and keeping that momentum going so that incremental progress leads to that systemic change that you're talking about.
No, I'll give you a couple insider tips now that I'm out of the legislature. Let's not fall for that false choice that because we have a tough budget year, we have to sacrifice our children. That's when we actually have to double down on our kids. My biggest pet peeve is the first thing that we were cut when there was a budget cut was education or safety net programs. Well, if there's a budget crisis in the state, who's going to suffer the most? People that need these programs, right? And so why not double down? And again, attitude shift if we create a powerful coalition. If they know, and by I mean legislators know that you cannot mess with certain parts of the budget, just like you can't mess with what some of the rich people want or some of the rich funders want. Even some of these advocacy, I'm not going to name names, but some of these really wealthy advocacies that have access to power, they don't care if it's a budget crisis. They're like my stuff's going to get funded no matter what. Like that's going to be it. So I don't want us to ever go, oh, it's going to be a tough budget year, so we have to once again prepare for budget cuts. No, this is when we hunker down and we're going to fight, because we cannot. This is when we fight for our communities and we build a strong enough coalition, and they won't touch that budget item, because it's like, and I would see us fall into that over time and time again. It reminded me when I would always talk to like first generation staffers, and I go, so what are your salary requirements? And they're like, well, I don't know, whatever you want to pay me. And I'm like, no, what are your salary requirements? What are you worth? And I think sometimes in the advocacy group, we fall into that trap, like, oh, we're just grateful to be in the room and give us what you can. No. And if you set your expectation here, that's how you're going to be treated in the legislature. That if you set yourself high, that's what we do. Because again, it's our children who we need to double down on, not like these wealthy donors or wealthy folks that, because if you look at the budget, Mayra, and you always see this, even in the toughest of years, there's some big time giveaways in there, always. Those people don't worry about a budget cut. Why are we worrying about a budget cut?
I appreciate that. I appreciate
my colleagues are going to kick my butt, but you know what?
I appreciate what you're saying, because it's the complexity of what many advocates, particularly those that are coming from the communities that we're advocating with and on behalf of, we carry with us. We carry those values. We carry the respect, and oftentimes it's to a detriment, right?
It's like I'll give you one more example. When we used to do these propositions, people of color, low-income folks, working class families are always willing to tax themselves, even if they don't have the money, but are the last to receive the parks, the resources, because it gets gobbled up by the folks that didn't even vote for it or didn't even want it, right? Because they're more sophisticated in drawing down that money. And it would piss me off that we're like, wait, people of color who don't have parks are, the ones that need it the most, but yet we've already funded all these conservancies. They got their big chunk of money. but yet we can't even get like a pocket park in certain parts of the east side, right? And so we are and this is why I love me, my immigrants, because we are hopeful. We are prideful. We want to contribute. We will sacrifice even our own money to be able to make sure we create a better community for all of us, right? And we need to make sure that the government realizes that and gives us a priority. So when we're fighting for a piece of the budget, if our community needs 100% of the money, we get 100% of the money. We're not going to create, bottom floors for like, 30% for low-income communities. No, if the need is there, 100% of the money has to go there, right? And if you're mad because you're not getting the money, then guess what? You live in a community that doesn't need it, right? You should be proud. I want to move to a community where I don't constantly need state budget for parks, for community clinics, for recreational spaces, because that means you have all of that, right? And so I think we need to like change that part too. This is where I'm going to be a little controversial. When the people say environmental justice, no, it's in the environment. I think environmental justice gives us like, oh, let's give them a percentage for environmental justice and they're going to be happy. No, this is an environmental.
It's everything.
It's everything. Like we're saying, it is all connected. And if our communities need 100% of the funding, they have to get 100% of the funding. So
yeah,
it's just a little budget strategy on that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so interesting to hear you say these words about how we can even change the narrative on our expectations, right? That it's not, let's work on health equity here. You can fight for health equity everywhere in our healthcare system, right? Whether it's a Medicare plan or delivery. Yeah. So we want to talk to the audience about their questions, but we're in an election year. This is a big election year. Everyone always points to this as the most monumental election of our history. But this is a pretty big one on everyone's mind as far as the national election. It's going to have monumental impacts on the lives of kids. We in California, we're grateful. We're represented by diverse leaders. I think I saw you on TV at the convention, smiling away. We've got senators who are parents of young kids. They're parents of color. They are queer parents. We've got a governor and a first partner, I think, understand the work of doing for kids.
You have guncles.
We have guncles galore. The work is all the more real for people because y'all have the decision-making power. So I want you to reflect, if I remember correctly, you protested for Proposition 187. And you then been a champion for Health4All. You've seen this 30-year trajectory. What are the lessons that we can take from California to that national level when we are worried about the state of our country, but there is hope in what California has done?
I always say, I talk to my colleagues in other states that are and communities as I've talked to folks out in Georgia, in just rural parts of the country, Latinos, Mixtecos from El Salvador, Guatemala, who are scared. And I say, look, California in the 90s was where the US is now. Let's not forget that in the 90s, we were one of the most anti-everything states. And that those kids were the ones who transformed the policies in this country. And I tell them, your kids one day are going to be the Georgia doctors, the Georgia state senator, the attorney general of Alabama, of Nebraska. And it is up to you to empower that child to be proud of who they are and understand their history and what they contribute so that they are ready to face the obstacles that they're going to face alone, because you have to face them alone, and then be ready to fight and transform the country. And I just had this conversation with folks in Alaska, of all places. And so they look to us as like, oh my God, it's because in California, I'm like, no, we were what the United States was. We heard that same rhetoric. You heard rhetoric from even Democratic US senators who are calling us, illegal immigrants. And so, it's going to take time. And I think it's going to shift, but this is why empowering those families that are in the trenches, girl, because they are like small town USA, and they're opening restaurants, they're opening little mercados, they are, you know, opening their Chinese restaurant, their Korean stores, and they're slowly shifting, you know, these small towns. And there's nothing like, and I equate this with the LGBTQ community and why it's important to have LGBTQ people out in serving in school boards and city councils, because it changes the dynamic when you know somebody who's different. It changes the dynamic when you get to meet, you know, Ms. Gonzalez and her 2 kids in rural Kentucky, right? And now they're not, you can't other them because they're your neighbors, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's easy, because I don't know how my parents did it, and I still always say, even in LA, but it slowly but surely the tides are going to change, because California's proven that you can actually embrace diversity and succeed economically, which at the very end is what the most conservative person wants, is to make sure that, you know, that we are succeeding economically and that we're building wealth. And, you know,
Absolutely.
the rich in California start getting richer, like nothing changes, and by giving people an opportunity, right? And so I think I'm just like you, I'm inspired. I needed it. I wasn't going to go to the convention, but I felt like I was a point, you know, I suffered through anxiety and depression, and I needed that. I was looking for some sort of purpose, because it's hard when you're now in the executive and you're alone and you're trying to manage these really complex issues. And just, it's hard. You're human. The rhetoric gets to you, you know, and even my friends nobody wanted to talk about anything. And so I needed to be there with like-minded folks. And yeah, maybe they call it our bubble, but I needed that energy. I needed to see Governor Walz's son say, "That's my dad," and tell him he loves him. I was like, you thought I was ugly crying now. I was like hot mess, but you know, I needed it for myself, and now I'm pumped. And seeing record numbers of voter registration. I was looking at some numbers that African American women, their voter registration's gone up by 157%. Latinas, 130 something percent. And you know, you've done something right when you were the Black women and the Latinos have had enough. They're like, okay, we're done. We're gonna register, and this is over for all you guys. And so I just, you know, I'm inspired. I got on that plane back, and I'm like, okay, I'm ready to put my gloves on. Let's go back and let's fight. And so for my own mental health, I needed to do it as well.
I want to, because yeah, I think this election is spurring interest across the political spectrum, right? As a nonprofit 501c3, it is you know, sparking interest across both sides of the aisle. But I want to tell you, you said something so important about what it matters, what is around us, what we surround ourselves with, who we connect with. Like the personal is political, the political is personal, and much of that is based in relationships and who your neighbor is, who's around you, which restaurants you go to, and who the lady is that you talk to, right? Or the gentleman that's fixing your car. That's community. And that is something that we want to move towards as we think about advocacy for children, that we are a community together that are fighting for our kids. And I could not, you know, thank you more for the work that you've done in that space. I want to, if you're okay, spend a couple minutes on some questions that have come through from folks.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned earlier, you know, that the fight for Health for All continues. And one question that comes up is this question around the health insurance marketplace and Covered California and the opportunity to allow undocumented members to purchase Covered California health insurance. So can you talk a little bit about how we continue that work, again, within the confines of within the limitations that we have? Talk a little bit about that to our audience member.
So one of the things, hopefully, if it goes the way I want this election to go, the first week, the Department of Insurance is gonna submit a request to the federal government to allow us to get a waiver so that in our ACA in California, we can allow undocumented folks to pay into the Affordable Care Act through a 1332 waiver process. I started this under Obama, and it took us a whole year to work that out. And then we had an election, and I had to pull back that waiver. But we're committed to bringing that back and working quickly. I don't want to waste time on, I don't want to wait again. I don't want to wait for a year, and when political interests get entrenched and all this, California's gonna move quick, because that's the last piece. And immigrants in California, at the time, I think it was like 40% of them make more money than to qualify for Medi-Cal. They should be paying into the Affordable Care Act. Those are the folks that we want. And so our department is putting together the briefs, the documents, getting it all ready. So what is it, January 7th, whatever, California is going to be the first to submit so that we can start this. I don't want to leave this position without having gotten that done, or at least starting the wheel on that.
That's incredible, Commissioner. I know that folks on this call that are listening are right there with you. And it's interesting, some folks might be wondering, this is a children's organization. Why are you focused on, adults getting this coverage? And we know that when
Healthy
adults
parents,
have health insurance coverage,
kids.
that kid is more likely to be covered as well. There is research, it's called the welcome mat effect, that tells us families are covered, that kid's going to be more likely to be covered. This
Healthy
is
parents, healthy kids.
Yes.
Healthy grandma, healthy kids. Healthy families, healthy kids.
Exactly. And I love, thank you for sharing about, even your own mental health struggles, because as we've seen from the pandemic and even before the pandemic, there's a youth mental health crisis that disproportionately impacts our kids of color, our Black girls, our Latinas. And this is an opportunity to give them tools and resources to support just that. So absolutely, I love that piece. The other part that's come up is thinking through, especially, in certain parts of the state of California that are more reflective of other parts of this country, that are more conservative, that may not be as progressive as some of our urban areas, and the work that we have to do to build those relationships, like you said, and where there's opportunity to move the needle when it comes to issues around LGBTQ young people, issues around immigrant communities. Again, regardless of the way the election goes, these conversations and struggles are going to continue. It's clear. And what sort of work and responsibility do we have to do that, particularly in our more rural and conservative areas here in California?
Which I know them very well, because they tend to be the ones that are hit by fires. And I walked into some of these communities in the Sierras that are like, who are you? And I'm like, I'm your insurance commissioner. And they're like, what? And, to those folks in those communities really doing the work, you'll be surprised to know that some of my best friends in the legislature are some of the most conservative Republicans. I can always, in a respectful way, and I think it was just the way my mom taught me, it's like, you can find something that you relate with somebody. And start there. Find a little nugget, and, not getting preachy, but then just, you get to know each other, because you know what? That same fear they have is the same fear I used to have of them. And then you realize, wait, we have more in common. I think we've lost that.
Yeah.
I think we're just so comfortable, like, being in our corners, and we're just so comfortable, just like, I don't want to talk to you, and we don't have to talk. But folks in the partnership, folks that do advocacy, that really want to leave some lasting change, we have to do that work. And you might not get them 100% of the time. If you get them 20% of the time, I could tell you, Mayra, numerous times where I couldn't even get Democrats to vote for some of my bills, but just because I had relationships, I used to call them my secret weapons, they would vote for it. They would just pass the vote and leave. And I'm like, one time I got a really big immigrant bill by one vote, and Republican from Bakersfield. And that's because I did the work of getting to know them. And then I would give a little, they would give a little. And so I think that takes, it's called political science for a reason. There's a science to this,
That's right.
And you have to learn what that is, and that approach. I think it's all based on fear. People who fear change, who fear, you know, the community's not gonna look like it used to. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but you have to acknowledge and see them. Maybe they're growing up. They didn't know how to handle these things, right? And so, but again, I'm gonna sound loud now like the Kamala campaign, but joy and respect is so underrated. And just respecting somebody and being able to listen to somebody goes so long, and we've lost that.
Yeah. You know, there you go again with like the power of relationships, right? Okay, so we've got a couple minutes left, and I want you to, I want to invite you to like help us end this conversation with a little bit of your words around the future. Like, consider what we, this community, this virtual room, the broader community, what we together can do for our children's future. What do you want us to walk away with today?
I want everybody on the call to walk away with one, look at what we were able to accomplish with just dreaming about the possibility of this happening one day. Think about, like, we all kind of came together in this haphazard way, and we're like, oh my God, Senator Lara's doing this. Is this going to happen or not? There's no way this can happen. We cuddled everybody together and we made it happen. Could you imagine what we do if we actually organize, if we actually put a multi-year agenda of what you all want to see in the state and fight for it, and be pragmatic, but not from that mentality where we have to, that we just go for it and start doing the work. I mean, we're unstoppable. I mean, this is the cat's out of the bag. I said, like, we were able to cobble this together, and I'll tell you, like, I'll give you another quick example of when I was when I told, like, the Bilingual Association teacher, I said, I'm going to repeal Prop 227. I'm going to repeal English only in California in our public schools. And they're like, oh my God, we've already tried doing this. We lost 2 years in a row, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, I'm going to do it. And let's not delve on like what happened in the past, and let's go for it. What do we have to lose? And we already lost. And we were able to repeal it. The proposition ended up being the most voted on proposition with 70% of the vote. And we were able to introduce multilingual education on our public schools. I mean, and so it's like, think about if we actually were intentional about the changes that we want to make. And so I'll say, create a clear pathway of what you want to accomplish in the next year, in the next couple of years, build that out and go for it. Just be unapologetic, and let's empower our children, empower themselves. Because I keep reminding myself of that. Like, I want my nieces and nephew to know to fight for themselves, because I'm not always going to be here, or I'm not going to be in a place where they're going to be, where they have to make decisions, right? So if they're secure in who they are, if they know, and creating, that's health, that's also mental health for them, something that I didn't have, So I just think the future's ours, man. I'm so pumped right now. I mean, maybe because I still have the high from the convention. But why not? Why not feel hopeful? Why not put together a plan of what we want our kids? We want, free lunch for kids. Why are we throwing away food at schools and kids going through dumpsters in public schools to get food for their family? Shit, they should be taking all that food home. We shouldn't be shaming kids for wanting to take home food. I mean, you name it. I just think it's amazing. I feel, and our kids are so awesome. Like, these kids are so incredible. I mean, and I'm learning just as much as, I don't know, I don't think they're learning anything from me, but they inspire me. And, these parents that are, teaching these kids, I love it. I love it. I mean, it's, to be a parent, a caregiver, somebody who's raising these young people, I give you kudos, man, because I see how difficult it is from birth to, college. And so, and the other thing too, I would say, Mayra, is how do we teach our young people to understand money, understand credit, and wealth building. As your insurance commissioner, I'm going to plug this right now. Think of a life insurance policy where if you have multiple kids, you take that policy out, make the siblings the beneficiaries, and then you have a nest egg for when they graduate college and they turn 18, they can have $100K in the bank available to them. Those are things that also create healthy children. The need to not have them, feel
Economic security.
Economic security is critical, just as a college savings account. So maybe we can work together on this. We've been trying to identify a model city where every child that's born in that city gets a life insurance policy along with the college savings account. So when the college savings account kicks in when they go to college, when they graduate and become adults, they can choose to keep that life policy or they can cash it in. And now they have money to buy a home, start a business, travel the world. I don't know, do whatever you want with it. So wealth building, understanding how to use money to make more money is going to be critical. And I think we cannot forget that piece.
I could not agree more. It's part of that whole continuum of services and supports that kids need to
Who taught us any of that? We got my first credit card at San Diego State University. Took me 10 years to pay back because I had no idea that, this is not free money.
That's right. That's right. Commissioner Lara, I feel like I could talk to you for hours. I'm so grateful for the conversation and for the trust and space that you've given us. I'm going to carry it with me. I'm going to keep on dreaming for kids and families in this great state of California. For everyone that's still with us in the chat, the team is going to share some good resources on immigrant health, on public charge, and what is and is not true. We've created these resources alongside some great partners in 8 languages, so encourage folks to please share those. I also want folks to save the date. On October 22nd in LA, downtown LA, we'll be having an event for closing out this 30th speaker series. Commissioner Lara, we'd love to see you there and, maybe dance the night away. If you're not.
I love the way you said LA.
Downtown Los Angeles, absolutely.
You said LA like an LA girl, LA.
So please fill out the form, folks on the line. And again, thank you for being with us, Commissioner. Thank you to our audience members to being in this good fight for kids' health. We so appreciate the support of you, our sponsors, and this incredible team at the Children's Partnership. We're looking forward to making good progress for our kids now, tomorrow, and in the future. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Mil gracias.
Ciao.